Dido Elizabeth Belle, was born into slavery as the natural daughter of Maria Belle, an enslaved African woman in the West Indies, and Captain John Lindsay, a British career naval officer who was stationed there. He was later knighted and promoted to admiral. Lindsay took Dido with him when he returned to England in 1765, entrusting her to his uncle William Murray, 1st Earl of Mansfield, and his wife to raise. The Murrays educated Dido, bringing her up as a free gentlewoman at their Kenwood House, together with their niece, Elizabeth Murray, whose mother had died. Belle lived there for 30 years. In his will of 1793, Lord Mansfield confirmed her freedom and provided an outright sum and an annuity to her. In these years, her great-uncle, in his capacity as Lord Chief Justice, ruled in two significant slavery cases, finding in 1772 that slavery had no precedent in common law in England, and had never been authorized under positive law. This was taken as the formal end of slavery in Britain. In a case related to the slave trade, he narrowly ruled that owners of a company were not due insurance payments for the loss of slaves during a voyage, as it appeared related to errors by the officers. Early life. Dido Elizabeth Belle was born into slavery in 1761 in the West Indies, to an enslaved African woman known as Maria Belle. Her father was Sir John Lindsay, a career naval officer and then captain of the British warship HMS Trent, based in the West Indies. Lindsay is thought to have found Maria Belle held as a slave on a Spanish ship which his forces captured in the Caribbean. He appears to have taken her as his concubine. Lindsay returned to England after the war in 1765, likely bringing at that time his young, mixed-race natural daughter to London. He entrusted her to the care of his uncle, William Murray, 1st Earl of Mansfield, and his wife. She was baptised as Dido Elizabeth Belle in 1766 at St George's Church, Bloomsbury. A contemporary obituary of Sir John Lindsay, who had been promoted to admiral later in his career, acknowledged that he was the father of Dido Belle, and described her. He has died, we believe, without any legitimate issue but has left one natural daughter, a mulatto who has been brought up in Lord Mansfield unregistered trademark S family almost from her infancy and whose amiable disposition and accomplishments have gained her the highest respect from all his lordship's relations and visitants. At one time, historians thought her mother was an African slave on a ship captured by Lindsay's warship during the capture of Havana in 1762. But, this specific date is unlikely as Dido was born in 1761, the previous year. At Kenwood House, William Murray, the Earl of Mansfield, lived with his family at Kenwood House in Hampstead, just outside London. Mansfield and his wife, Lady Marjorie Murray, who were childless, were already raising Lady Elizabeth Murray, born 1760, after her mother's death. It is possible that the Mansfields took Dido in to be Elizabeth's playmate and, later in life, her personal attendant. Dido lived at Kenwood House for 30 years. Her position was unusual, because she was born into slavery in terms of colonial law. The Murrays to some extent treated her and brought her up as a member of the Murray family. As she grew older, she often assisted Mansfield by taking dictation of his letters, which showed she had been educated. One of Mansfield's friends, American Thomas Hutchinson, a former governor of Massachusetts who as a loyalist had moved to London, recalled that Dido was called upon by my lord every minute for this thing and that, and showed the greatest attention to everything he said. He described her as, neither handsome nor genteel, pert enough. Lord Mansfield ruled on a related matter of the status of slaves in England in his capacity as Lord Chief Justice of England and Wales. When called on in 1772 to judge the case of an escaped slave whose owner wanted to send him back to the West Indies for sale, Somerset's case, he decreed, "The state of slavery is of such a nature, that it is incapable of being introduced on any reasons, moral or political. But only positive law, which preserves its force long after the reasons, occasion, and time itself from whence it was created, is erased from memory, it's so odious, that nothing can be suffered to support it but positive law. Whatever inconveniences, therefore, may follow from a decision, I cannot say this case is allowed or approved by the law of England." Mansfield's ruling that slavery did not exist in common law and had never been introduced by positive law, was taken by abolitionists to mean that slavery was abolished in England. His ruling was narrow and reserved judgment on this point, saying only that the slave's owner had no right to remove Somerset from England against his will. Mansfield later said his decision was intended only to apply to the slave at issue in the case. At the time it was suggested that Mansfield's personal experience with rearing Dido Belle influenced his decision. Thomas Hutchinson later recalled a comment by a slave owner. "A few years ago there was a cause before his lordship brought by a black for recovery of his liberty. A Jamaica planter, being asked what judgment his lordship would give, answered no doubt. He will be set free, for Lord Mansfield keeps a black in his house which governs him and the whole family a unregistered trademark. Social position, the social conventions of his household are unclear." A 2007 exhibit at Kenwood suggests that she was treated as a loved but poor relation, and therefore did not always dine with guests, as was reported by Thomas Hutchinson. He said Dido joined the ladies afterward for coffee in the drawing room. In 2014 author Paula Byrne wrote that Dido's exclusion from this particular dinner was pragmatic rather than the custom. She notes that other aspects of Dido's life, such as being given expensive medical treatments and luxurious bedroom furnishings, were evidence of her position as Elizabeth's equal at Kenwood. As Dido grew older, she took responsibility to manage the dairy and poultry yards at Kenwood. She also helped Mansfield with his correspondence, which was an indication that she was fairly well educated. The running of the dairy and poultry yard would have been a typical occupation for ladies of the gentry, but helping her uncle with his correspondence was less usual. This was normally done by a male secretary or a clerk. Dido was given an annual allowance of £30.10, several times the wages of a domestic servant. By contrast, Elizabeth received around £100, but she was an heiress in her own right through her mother's family. Dido, quite apart from her race, was illegitimate, in a time and place when great social stigma usually accompanied such status. Later life, Dido's father died in 1788 without legitimate heirs, bequeathing £1,000 to be shared by his reputed children, John and Elizabeth Lindsay. Historian Jean Adams believed this suggested that Lindsay referred to his daughter as Elizabeth, and she may have been named Dido by his uncle and his wife, after they took charge of the girl. Another source says that there was another natural daughter, known as Elizabeth Palmer, who lived in Scotland. Dido also inherited £100 from Lady Marjorie Murray in 1793, one of two women relatives who had come to live with and help care for the Murrays in their later years. In his will written in 1783, Lord Mansfield officially confirmed Dido's freedom to secure her future. He also bequeathed Dido with £500 as an outright sum and £100 annuity, which she received after his death in 1793. William Murray left his niece Elizabeth Murray £10,000. Her father was in line to inherit his father's title and more money. After her great-uncle's death in March 1793, Dido married John de Vigny, a Frenchman who worked as a gentleman's steward, on December 5, 1793 at St George's, Hanover Square. They were both then residents of the parish. The de Vignys had at least 3 sons, twins Charles and John, both baptized at St George's on May 8, 1795. And William Thomas, baptized there on January 26, 1802. Dido Belle de Vigny died in 1804 at the age of 43. She was interred in July of that year at St George's Fields, a burial ground close to what is now Bayswater Road. In the 1970s, the site was redeveloped and her grave was moved. She was survived by her husband, who later remarried and had 2 more children with his second wife. Descendants, Belle's son Charles de Vigny, served in what was informally known as the Indian Army. His service probably began with one of the territorial armies that was founded before the formation of the British Indian Army in 1858. Her last known descendant, her great-great-grandson Harold de Vigny, died in South Africa in 1975 without having had children. Mansfield family tree. Representation in other media, the family commissioned a painting of Dido and Elizabeth. completed in 1779, it was formally attributed to Johann Zoffany. It is unique in British art of the 18th century in depicting a black woman and a white woman as near equals. It shows Dido carrying exotic fruit and wearing a turban with a large feather. She is alongside and slightly behind her cousin Elizabeth. Dido is portrayed with great vivacity, while her cousin appears more sedate and formal. Her cousin's hand lies gently upon Dido's arm, suggesting affection and equality rather than a subordinate status. The painting, which hangs at Scone Palace in Perth, Scotland, is owned by the present Earl of Mansfield. In 2007 it was exhibited in Kenwood, together with more information about Belle, during an exhibition marking the bicentenary of the abolition of the Slave Trade Act 1807. Film, music, plays. Dido Belle, a film by Jason Young, was written as a short-period drama entitled Kenwood House. It was workshopped at Battersea Arts Centre on June 21, 2006 as part of the Battersea Writers Group script development programme. Shirley J. Thompson's operatic trilogy, Spirit Songs, including Spirit of the Middle Passage about Dido Elizabeth Belle, with Abigail Kelly in the role, was performed with a Philharmonia Orchestra at London's Queen Elizabeth Hall, South Bank Centre, in March 2007 as part of the 200-year commemoration of the Act abolishing the international slave trade. Let Justice Be Done, Mixed Blessings Theatre Group. 2008 play explores the influence that Belle might have had on her great-uncle's Somerset ruling of 1772. An African Cargo by Margaret Busby, staged by Nitro at Greenwich Theatre, 2007, in commemoration of the bicentenary of the abolition of the Slave Trade Act. The play deals with a landmark 1783 trial presided over by Lord Mansfield, resulting from the Zong massacre. The character of Belle expresses feelings of horror and injustice for the murder of the slaves on the ship. Belle, a feature film directed by Amma Asante, explores Dido's life as the mixed-race natural daughter of an aristocrat in 18th-century England. She became an heiress but occupied an ambiguous social position. The film stars Gugu Mbatha-Raw as Dido and Tom Wilkinson as her guardian Lord Mansfield. Novel, Family Likeness, a 2013 novel by Caitlin Davis, was inspired in part by the life of Dido Elizabeth Belle. Author Paula Byrne was commissioned to write Belle, the true story of Dido Belle as a tie-in to the 2013 movie, Belle. It was published as an audiobook when the movie opened in the United States. References. External links: Dido Belle at Kenwood, Untold London, Slavery and Justice at Kenwood House, exhibition on Mansfield and Dido. English Heritage Leaflet, Slavery and Justice, The Legacies of Dido Belle and Lord Mansfield Part 1, English Heritage Leaflet, Slavery and Justice, The Legacies of Dido Belle and Lord Mansfield Part 2, Paula Byrne, Belle, The True Story of Dido Belle, Harper Audiobooks, 2014, The Scotsman, article on abolition of the slave trade, BBC website, article on discovering Dido in Hampstead Matters, February 2014, 1.